Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. I hope you had a nice evening last night. Have you been out to Pontachor or Guyane, have a nice drink or shopping? I had. Well, I'd like to welcome all of you back to the 4th World Conference on Tourism and Culture, Investing in Future Generations. I'd like to recap the first day. We had Her Imperial Highness, Princess Akiko of Mikasa, sharing her personal experiences and her views on Japanese tradition and culture. We had international ministers and high-level representatives sharing their policies and thoughts on tourism. And we had an inspiring session of panelists on transmitting culture for tourism enrichment and mutual understanding. Now today, we will focus on 2 key topics. 1, redefining tourism management for local community empowerment. 2nd, strengthening capacities for sustainable development of cultural tourism. Now we will proceed with session 2. Redefining tourism management for local community empowerment. Now let me explain to you what this session is about. It will provide an insight into management models and tools designed to meet the needs and interests of different stakeholders, with communities at the center of this approach. It will discuss innovative and inclusive initiatives from different perspectives, presented by representatives from indigenous communities, research institutes, creatives, and the private sector. And to moderate this session, I'd like to invite Mr. Peter De Bruyn, Senior Project Officer, UNESCO's World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program, to the stage. Mr. De Bruyn.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first start off by thanking our hosts for their wonderful hospitality. I hope everybody had a wonderful evening last night. And to our dear colleagues and friends and our sister organization of UNWTO. When we think of culture and heritage, we often think about the preservation and the restoration, the excavation of old sites and old buildings. But of course, it's much, much more than that. Our cultural heritage is full of the range of inherited traditions, practices, expressions, representations, monuments, and objects. Culture is basically who we are. Our songs and dances, food, and language, and how we communicate and identify ourselves are as important as historical buildings and archaeological sites. UNESCO engages in tourism primarily through the lenses of our cultural conventions, whose aim is to safeguard and protect cultural heritage. But we recognize the benefits of tourism for local economic development and why it's important in the contribution to the creative industries. But as we heard yesterday, growth comes with challenges. Destinations are becoming so popular that sites are being overwhelmed and communities are pushing back. We now have this concept of over-tourism. So on the one hand, it could be a question of numbers and management. But there needs to be recognition that there's a shared responsibility to solve some of the problems that we're facing. On the one hand, there's policy levers. We'll hear a bit about that in the discussions. On the other hand, there's private sector engagement, which is vital if we are to achieve the sustainable future that we want. And of course, there is community engagement and empowerment. But we are the travelers. We're buying the products and services. We have a choice. Our behavior has a tremendous impact on communities. We should all be demanding high-quality visitor experiences. So today we're going to hear from a very impressive line of speakers how we can redefine tourism management for local community empowerment. And we're going to hear about festivals in March and November, why we should travel in the shoulder seasons. We're going to be told about places and other things to experience and get us to spend that critical other night and take time to learn about the stories. We heard about the importance of storytelling in tourism and the amazing places doing amazing things. Amazing people doing amazing things. And we need to keep reaching and connecting with the consumers at every touch point to inspire learning and sharing. So without much further ado, I'd like to invite the first speaker to the podium. So please join me in inviting Sa Kokoto, who is the elder of the Blackfoot Traditional Territory in Canada. And the question that Mr. Kokoto is going to address is, how can World Heritage Sites such as Asiana-Pi, is that correct? Or Writing on the Wall, I think that's how it translates, can raise awareness of the importance of developing management structures in collaboration with Indigenous peoples. And I want to personally thank Mr. Kokoto on the recent inscription of your site to the World Heritage List. So please, Mr. Kokoto.
Okay, nixo ko kitkhona exmatsem khpoa. Itaniko sa kokoto. Yumkhto to kana. Yumkhto tsitapi mutuspitex. And in my language, the Blackfoot language, oki means hello. Nixo ko, my relatives. Kitkhona exmatsem khpoa, I greet you all. Itaniko, my name is Sakokoto. Sakokoto was a name that was given to me by my father. That was my great-grandfather's name. And when I decided to take his journey to follow his footsteps, I was given that name. But along with the name come many responsibilities. And to honor my great-grandfather, I fulfill those responsibilities, and I'm doing that today by sharing stories and also lessons and about who we are. And what Sakokoto means is clear icicle, or when you see a lake and the ice is frozen, it's just like glass, that's Sakokoto. Yomhtuto, I come from Kaina. Kaina, we're one of the First Nations in Canada that belong to the Blackfoot-speaking people. Yomhtutsitapi, I come from Mutuspitex, the all-tall people clan. Introductions are very important in my culture. Introductions is a way as to how you begin developing a relationship to establish that trust and that respect, and that's very important. So in my introduction, you learn 5 things about me: the language that I speak, my name, what it means, the nation that I come from, and also the clan. I would also like to acknowledge the people of the land for allowing me to come onto your land and to allow me to share our rich culture and our way of life, which is very important to us. And this is how we acknowledge all nations around the world, how we can ensure that we have that relationship, which is really important to our way of life. Our way of life is to coexist and to share anything that we can with our friends and also with our neighbors. Now, my culture is not a written culture. It's an oral culture where everything was passed down from generation to generation. And just think, for thousands of years, my way of life, ceremonies, and language survived. How did it survive? Stories. Stories is very important in my way of life. And this is where the ancestors ensured that our way would be preserved by telling stories and sharing that with the children. The children grow up with these stories, and this is how it's passed down from generation to generation, and that's very important for us. My grandparents had a very important part in my way of life. They wanted to ensure that I would remember all the stories that were shared with me, but just think they were never written. But their way of sharing stories was very unique, very ceremonial, and that's what makes it very special. At the top, we have my territory, the Blackfoot territory. And in my language, Essenape does not mean to write. Essenape means to make your mark or to draw, and also to carve into the stone travels, experiences, ceremonies, even wars. It is called writing on stone and is a very unique place. And that is an area where the ancestors left pictographs and petroglyphs. We're going back about 4,000 years. And this is our way, our testimony as to the connection that we had with the land. Our way of life is having the kinship. We talk about the beings of the land, beings of the water, beings of the sky. That is our way of life where everything has a spirit because we coexist, and that's very important for us. Essenape is an area that is very sacred. Many ceremonies have taken place in that valley and all over our territory. Ceremonies is a way of life as to how we acknowledge and to have that respect for all mankind, the animal kingdom, because we coexist and we need one another to survive on this world. The area is very unique. You're driving on a prairies which is flat, and all of a sudden you come into a valley. I call it magical because of the experiences that you have. And the hoodoos, which is sand formations that had evolved over time, and where the wind, the rain, and the snow shaped these hoodoos. And we call the hoodoos matapi, the people, because of the things that we see. Sometimes it's very difficult to explain the mysteries of our land and our belief. And what we experience on a land is very important for us. The young child, and you see a lodge in the back. That is what a lot of people would refer to as a teepee, but we call it a lodge, a moyis. Moyis is what we identify that as our home, and that is very important to us. And the young child, even today, a young child in my culture is a leader. They are the ones that we are teaching to carry forward our way of life and what they need to know to ensure our way survives. To the far right, one of our ancestors wearing our traditional Blackfoot headdress. His name is Sitsawanan. Sitsawanan means bird rattle. And he would be the last Blackfoot person to record on the stone. And he did the recording in September of 1929, where he carved his journey with some non-Indigenous people. But for him, it was very important because he needed to show the world how we do things to ensure that we continue sharing our rich culture and our history. At the bottom is one of our petroglyphs. Our way of life, everything is circular, and that's very important because we feel that we need to share that. How do I go up? These are, again, a man with a top knot. This has to be earned, and what this identifies is an individual with very high status, either a great leader, hunter, or a person that leads ceremonies. And there is a petroglyph right next to it that identifies how we acknowledge our people. The man standing next to me is my uncle. He's about 90 years old. That is my university. This man is very wealthy in wisdom, knowledge, a way of life that he shares. And in the background, you have the stone where it is recorded. Our visitor center is not huge. We're a very small administrative structure. But we also use technology, and I really appreciate that being shared yesterday, where virtual reality, augmented reality is also used. And we also share our knowledge through books. And we try and provide as many books as we can to the public, so that way they can read about who we are, and that's circulated right throughout the world. So that's very important for us. So Charlie is a very important part of in my life, and his name is Big Lodge. This is the message we want to convey to the world. We have a story to tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakokoto, for that very inspirational presentation and the importance of sharing culture, but really sharing a way of life. And I think it's important, again, we hear the idea of stories and storytelling, but in terms of stories being a ceremony, and that ceremony as an expression of your way of life. So thank you very much for that. It gives me great pleasure to announce our next speaker, Ms. Veomani Duangdala, who is the co-founder of Okpoptok in the Laos Republic, the Lao People's Democratic Republic in Luang Prabang. I have had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Duangdala and experiencing the wonderful Okpoptok that she's going to be describing to everyone today. And she's going to be addressing the question of why is it relevant to inform the visitor of the involvement of the local community in the elaboration of cultural goods. So please, Veo, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So can I say konnichiwa? First of all, I would like to express my thank you to the organizer UNWTO and the host. It's been an honor to be here and be part of this great event. So you see the lip panel as the very limited slide. So I have this is why we become Okpoptok is all about our team. So I started this project in end of 2000 with my English friends. So back then, we were young, so we just finished basically, college, and we say, what should we do? Actually, I grew up in a weaving family and very similar culture of Mr. Satoko. I hope I say his name right. So you probably wondered what is Okpoptok mean. So Okpoptok is mean east means west. So when I met Joanna in 1999, I grew up in a weaving family, and we say the tradition of the weaving culture is part of our daily life. So everywhere you go around the country, each part of the country will be divided, like how culture and the textile represent our cultural identity. So when I met Joe, I say, the traditional is carry on, but how that we can take further. So then I taught you how to weave. This gave me impression like how actually Joanna came from England, and she put all these color together that Lao artists never do that. You probably know what's the London color. It's black and white and gray. We say, who will wear those color? So, but it turned out like well, we have to open our mind, We know the culture is always dynamic, it's always changing. And we want to make this for the visitor, Back then, in 1995, Luang Prabang just had been declared to be a World UNESCO Heritage Town. And we have, visitors come in. We decide we want people to take home with our cultural identity. So that's our design philosophy behind that people can take Lao textile home with a modern design that they can use in their daily life or in their hometown. So UNWTO is a social enterprise based in Luang Prabang. And our mission is called Big Mission, to help elevate the profile of Lao textile and artisan to increase producer income and to facilitate creative and educational collaboration among Lao people and international community. Operating under the brand Discover Lao through textile. So as you know that you can discover the country by either textile or by food or by festival, and Laos have a rich culture of all of them. So as Mr. Dublin have been to our place. And the idea is to bring people to share our knowledge and idea, So also keep handmade textile dynamic involving societally and economically, and to experience Lao culture through its artisan craftsmanship. So why we create the Living Craft Center that I'll show you in the last short video. So we have so many visitors come to town and asking why this textile made, who you made it for. So then it leads us to open this Living Craft Center where people can visit the artists working. It's a center, the workshop. We open to everyone, to the student from primary school up to university. All visitors that can visit. It's a free entry, and we train our guide as our textile, our brand ambassador, to give a short tour around the center that you can learn from the silk making to natural dye, to meet artists, all different techniques, and to finish the product. So this is a proud achievement for us. So this year is our 19th year. We start from very small shop, as I mentioned earlier, Amit Joanna, with the 5 of us, and then the project grow naturally. So now we have a team of 50 artists working full-time, and plus all this income generated that we can employ. You probably see the photo that we have from the gardener to many departments. So there are almost 80 staff. So in the center, we offer classes to the artists and to the visitor that can have hand-on experience. Actually, the natural dye class, weaving, batik, bamboo, all these classes that the visitor can have personal connecting to the artist, to share the culture experience. So this is a highlight of our center, and we have very good feedback from all visitors who have been tried the class. And that leads to the storytelling. Yeah, I think many people try to communicate this. It's very successful tool for us. That every product, from the fiber to finished product, that have value chain. So everyone that have involved. So people like to know where this product made, and that they appreciate of all the work. So after the class, nobody bargain our product. So it's very good very powerful too. So also the center, when people come take the class, they want to eat local food. Our chef is also the master weaver, so everyone loves her food. We offer weavers lunch, very basic, but it's fun to eat our way and get real experience and Lao taste. So that leads us to open our cafe, which is called Silk Road Cafe. So the Silk Road Cafe, we try to cover all the food from, China, the where sales start, to the Middle East. So they give the taste to everyone, so you can enjoy the food. And also later on, people want to stay on outside to learn the class. So we open the villa. It's a 5 theme room that each room have the theme of the textile in different ethnic group. So And I show you the next slide. So how the local community involved. How do I do that? So this is the big part of the project. Now, we opened the center in 2006, but actually the Village Rivers project we start around 2002. So how we start this Village Rivers project, how the community get involved. So through my experience, my mother is a big inspiration for me that she worked for the community, and we get the benefit. It's a way of the health poverty, deduct poverty, and women that when they get earned income and give very big support to the family. And we have many children of our weaver that be able to support. They can finish university study because of their weaving skill, and they can earn the income from home. It's a challenge for the Lao artists that they don't want to travel and they don't want to work. They want to work at home. So we work with more than 500 artists around the country with different ethnic groups. The whole country, we have 17 provinces, so we work with 14 provinces, different ethnic groups now, so 14 ethnic groups. Laos is a small country, we only have 7 million population, but we have over 100 subgroups. So, and that's create the Lao culture very special. So, I think my time ran out. So, in close, I'd like to share you the short videos about our center. How do I work that? Okay, please enjoy. The family car is very popular. Actually, it's our workshop here. It's not just for visitors, so it's our real production happen here. This is part of our non-profit project that we collect textiles around the country. We have over 1,000 objects in our collection. That's the Mekong. This is our villa. So we offer free tuk-tuk from town to our center. Actually, we have 2 shops downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veomani, for that, again, a very inspirational presentation. I mean, Okpaktap is a woman-owned and operated enterprise, so congratulations. It's really a great, I think, example of a cultural expression being expressed through textiles, but I think the really importance is the fact that you're operating a living craft center and employing over 50 women from across the country. So thank you very much. Okay, so our next speaker, we're going to be shifting a bit, both geographically and subject-wise. It's a pleasure to introduce Ms. Michaela Saisana, who is the head of the Monitoring Indicators and Impact Evaluation Unit at the European Commission's Competence Center on Composite Indicators and Scoreboards. I think you get the prize for the longest title of where you work. But it's abbreviated COIN, so that's probably easier to understand. And Ms. Saisana is going to talk to us about joint research and what are the next steps in the research agenda to further prove the relevance of culture in urban destinations and in which areas there is still more work to be done. I think there's a very common thing: you can't manage what you can't measure. So please, Michaela, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased and honored to be here, and I would like to give a warm thank you to the organizers, the UNWTO and UNESCO, and the City of Kyoto for this very warm hospitality. I'm sure if I ask you what culture means to you, everybody will give me a name. To me, culture is a game changer. It's a mind opener. It's a driver of positive change for the people and for the places where they live. And now, in order to animate you, I would like to ask you, how many of you I think I got it. How many of you recognize this city? Nobody? Maybe. Well, maybe some Italian people would say that, well, I see a few hands, actually. Now, this is Florence, and the reason you didn't recognize it is maybe because I took out its main cathedral. Maybe now you would recognize Florence. Huh? Maybe now you would recognize Florence? Well, if I ask you to take an historical monument out of a city, it's like asking you to imagine Kyoto without its temples. I'm sure you would be shocked. Huh? So today I will introduce you to a monitoring tool that we developed at the European Commission's Joint Research Center, which is the scientific arm of the European Commission, 3,000 scientists working in that center. And we wanted to monitor and to measure culture and creativity in cities around Europe. Why? Because our policymakers and the local authorities are asking us, where are the cultural and creative cities in Europe, and what are the impacts, the economic ones and social ones, that culture and creativity can bring to the citizens? There are many tools out there that somehow try to monitor culture and creativity, but we wanted to build something relatively unique. We wanted to build the Cultural and Creative Cities Monitor, which is a tool that zooms in on cities that are already demonstrating that they're very actively engaged in promoting culture and creativity. We have selected 190 cities in Europe, all of them being very good examples of what culture and creativity means. And how did we choose those cities? We used 3 criteria in order to put them in our big data set. They have to be European capitals of culture or shortlisted to become one until 2023. And in this way, we got 98 cities. They also have to be part, or they have to be part of the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. So we got 59 more cities in our data set. And then, in order to qualify, you may also host 2 international festivals. And in this way, we got 33 cities entering into this data set. Now, the Cultural and Creative Cities Monitor is asking different questions and is trying to answer those questions. What is a city's cultural infrastructure and participation in culture? To what extent do the cultural and creative sectors contribute to a city's economy in terms of the employment, of the job creation, and of innovation? And finally, what are the tangible and the intangible assets that a city possesses in order to attract talent and to foster creativity and culture? We checked and we crunched the numbers, and we shortlisted 29 indicators. So we got a data set that gives a coherent story for those 190 cities across 29 indicators, 29 different issues related to culture. But in order to come to those 29, we first started from 200, but we excluded those that you didn't have enough data to tell a story, or they were not matching each other. Now, I'm sure at some point you would say, give me the result, give me the ranking, give me the best performer. What is the ideal city in Europe? Now, I'll give you a teaser. The ideal cultural and creative city in Europe does not exist. Instead, you have to take 7 different cities, put them together, and that's how you get the ideal city. So you would have to take Paris in France, You have to take Florence in Italy, Weimar in Germany, Eindhoven in the Netherlands, Budapest in Hungary, Glasgow in the UK, and Aarhus in Denmark. And I guess you still want the full ranking, don't you? Like everybody that puts the numbers, you need a full ranking. Well, I'm not going to give you the full ranking. And the reason is that we do that on purpose. We wanted to build a tool that is actually fostering peer learning, not a competition. That's why we have compared the cities among peers based on their population size, based on their employment levels, and based on their income levels. So somehow you end up with 25 different rankings based on the group where you belong to. So the Cultural and Creative Cities Network Monitor, maybe just exactly for this reason that we didn't want to build a full ranking, has been one of the agreed frameworks that is currently being used now in the European Union to benchmark culture and creativity. It has been presented in over 30 high-level events. It also presented at universities and academics, and also to the key EU institutions. Let me give you an example of how this tool is actually being used by the different cities. And if you look at the monitor, you'll find more than 190 examples, because every city has a good example to offer. Now, let me give you just some hints. The City Council of Edinburgh actually developed a new visualization tool that allows participants to develop their own city-relevant stories based, again, on this visualization tool. Another example is the city of Leeuwarden, where they have, in the Netherlands, where together with the Eurocities Network and the European Festival Association, they have organized a World Café, presenting this monitor to more than 20 European cities and comparing each other, trying to find the common challenges based on the data and to share possible solutions. Other examples come from the cities of Geneva and the city of Győr, where they have also organized different workshops engaging with local operators, business representatives, and they have been using this tool in order to benchmark with peer cities, in order to identify fit-for-purpose local strategies. And a final example comes from the city of Madrid, where they have used this tool in order to try to figure out how best to promote their museums and their historical sites and their festivals in order to improve in the international branding. Now, when it comes to presenting tools like this one, somebody would argue, but for whom is this tool? Is it for me? This tool is actually for everyone. So if you are a policymaker or a mayor, you can look maybe on the right-hand side, where you'll see that the tool, the online tool, presents a wealth of information on how to create your own monitor, how to play with the assumptions that we made when we put all these numbers together. You can also add your own data if some of those data that we used are missing, or you can even add anew your city, because we have included 190 cities. But if you would like, for instance, to see how Kyoto compares to European cities, and you have the values for those indicators, you could plug it in, and then you see how your city performs. And you can also build scenarios of, what if I change my policy in that field? What impact would I have on the ground? And of course, if you are an informed citizen, and if you are a scientist, a researcher, you can get the wealth of the data there. You can try to play and try to understand what happens in your own city. There is such a wealth of information, but at some point somebody would argue, well, let's change a little bit the question. It's not what the city can do for me, but me as a mayor, as a simple citizen, as an organization, I can do for the city. It brings us back to what Peter said, that promoting culture and tourism is really a shared responsibility. Everybody has his fair share. And I do hope that the monitor and many other of good practices that we have seen here are the right steps in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michaela. I think, again, it really underscores the importance of how what seems like a complicated subject, how we can monitor creativity and culture within a city, but we can also develop a tool that provides that very important baseline and that information. So you can take something that's probably up here, but also make it fit for purpose, as you said, and create those local strategies. I think it's a wonderful tool, and I think should encourage everybody to use it. Okay, so next up, our next speaker, I again have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Jean-Philippe Monon. He's the Vice President of Government Relations and Corporate Affairs at the Expedia Group. And Mr. Monon is going to discuss how are sustainable practices of tourism businesses influencing travelers' preferences. Mr. Monon, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. We live in turbulent times, but I am personally convinced, and with us, with me, about 23,000 colleagues, that travel breaks down barriers. It connects us culturally, it connects us emotionally, it connects us physically. It changes how we see the world and our place in it. Expedia Group's purpose is to bring the world within reach, and we've done so for the last 23 years. So when I started working for Expedia, I didn't know it was actually already a company that's been around for 23 years, and online travel has been around for 23 years. It has grown. At the moment for Expedia, we facilitate more than $100 billion in gross bookings every year. But with this growth comes the responsibility for sustainable growth for the future. Growth that creates respect for all of the great sites you have already seen, the cultural experiences, the natural beauty of our world. We facilitate around or more than 350 million room nights. To put that in perspective, that's around 1 million room nights per day. We have, in the 8 minutes that I'm actually speaking, there will be around 5,300 room nights booked already while I'm speaking in the world. Of course, the idea is that we focus on making sure that all of those bookings are spread such that we have a tourism growth that is sustainable, growing local regions and not growing or trying to get all the tourists to one spot. We operate around 200 different travel sites, and through those sites we also promote specific regions together with governments, together with other travel players and suppliers. We have therefore taken our responsibility to focus on the growth of sustainable travel. And it is therefore that we have developed these 4 pillars. 4 pillars for sustainable travel, focusing on environmental conservation, disaster recovery, economic and community development, and responsible tourism. I don't have the time, unfortunately, to give you all the details of the various elements that we do, but maybe to highlight a couple. We, of course, ourselves take the responsibility to have a carbon footprint that is zero, carbon neutral as a company. But we also focus on making sure that suppliers and travelers have limited impact in terms of the environmental footprint. And it is with that great pleasure that we are working together in partnership with UNESCO, and that we have recently launched a sustainability tourism pledge, which I will show you a little bit more detail on in a minute. We are working with areas that have been hit by disaster to help those communities rebuild critical locations and support resilience efforts. promote travel to these affected destinations. We focus on the development of our tourism areas, promote local eco-friendly visits. We encourage buying and sourcing of locally produced foods. And through the pledge, we also encourage our suppliers to source locally and to grow, to buy locally produced products. And lastly, we focus on responsible tourism in the sense that our travelers need to have respect for all those great locations they visit. It is not about consuming, it is about experiencing travel. And I think most importantly, as we are a technology company, we want to make sure that we use the data that we get in the right way for our travel partners, for governments, for organizations we work with, to give insights into how the travel flows are moving and how to make sure we can focus those growth opportunities to areas that can actually really benefit from it, and try to divert that flow from those areas that face an overflow of tourism. Let's see if I can. So it is with that great pleasure that we have kicked off this partnership with UNESCO, focusing on sustainable tourism. And so this partnership program with UNESCO has now started with a pilot in Thailand, together with the Tourism Authority of Thailand, to focus on getting our partners to sign up to a pledge, which would be simple and uncomplicated, but yet very effective, supporting the reduction and elimination of single-use plastics, and also to support and promote local culture and local communities. And we will, once our partners have signed up to this pledge, make sure that we give additional visibility to our partners, such that consumers who have interest in focusing on players and hotels that have signed up to this pledge, that we give greater visibility and therefore the ability for consumers to choose those players over those that have not signed up to the pledge. And that hopefully creates the incentive for all of those players to sign up. Lastly, not only are we working with our travel partners, we're not only working with consumers, with UNESCO, with the UNWTO as an affiliate member, but we're also obviously working with governments across the world in a partnership where we focus on 4 key areas: providing insights into travel. When are people booking their travel? Where are they going? Can we promote specific areas that are not so much visited? We do that marketing together with all of those governments, with the tourism boards across the globe. We also help our partners to be more online. So we have workshops to make sure people know what the world has to offer when it comes to online, making sure we have the right pictures, the right tools for our partners to be visible in the best way. And we want to focus our travelers onto those areas that focus on sustainable travel, and those partners that sign up to the pledge. So, in conclusion, there is enormous opportunity for growth of our sector of tourism, but we have to focus on sustainable tourism growth in order to keep this the wonderful place, the wonderful earth that we have, and the great cultural experiences that we would like to share among each other, and the ones that I've been hearing about, for example, today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Philippe. I think it really demonstrates the need, and you are really, as we say, walking the talk in terms of on that journey of sustainability, because I really think it is a journey to achieve true sustainability. but understanding that we can't do it alone. As I said, it is a shared responsibility between the private sector, working with governments and working with intergovernmental organizations like UNESCO and UNWTO. So we are very excited about our partnership, and thank you for your remarks. And finally, our last speaker is Mr. David Atkinson, who's the CEO of Konishi Decorative Arts and Crafts Limited, Japan. And he's going to be talking about, in the Japanese context, in the Japanese market, to which extent local communities involved in the overall urban and cultural tourism planning and destinations, such as Kyoto. So I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion, focusing again on Kyoto. So Mr. Atkinson, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I first came to Japan 30 years ago, and I've been working with the Japanese government for the last 6 years on the tourism strategy. I think there's a somewhat different facet of tourism for Japan. Until 6 years ago, Japan was welcoming around about 8 million tourists per year to a country with 127 million population. Last night I was sitting next to the representative from Greece. They get 30 million for a population of 10 million. So a very, very different multiple there. In Japan, the numbers of people coming to visit Japan has gone from 8 million then to 31 million today. And in terms of revenues, Japan has gone from 26th globally to 9th last year. So a very, very significant change. For Kyoto specifically, and for other parts of the country, since the company that I run, Konishi UNWTO, is the largest, or one of the largest, heritage restoration companies in Japan. One of the problems that was being faced by Kyoto and other places was a massive decline in domestic tourism as a result of the decline in population. Between now and 2060, the working age population, those people older than 16 and younger than 64, will decline by 42.5%, or 32.6 million people. That, incidentally, is the size of the working population of the UK. And the enormous decline in domestic tourism revenues that created has meant that heritage in Japan, and specifically at that time in Kyoto, has seen an enormous decline in its revenues, whilst on the other side, the cost of supporting this heritage obviously is not going down. And the enormous increase that therefore has been seen in a very, very short period of time. And of course, there have been and are still some very significant teething problems that are being caused as a result of this. Some of the local communities, there are complaints about not being able to get on the bus because it's full of overseas tourists, and there are complaints about too many people on the streets and various other problems. And certainly that is overall an issue that has to be dealt with, but within the context of the fact that really a lot of the cultural heritage of this country has no choice other than to increase the number of people coming in from overseas in the context of an enormous decline in the number of people visiting Kyoto from other parts of Japan. And certainly in my work with the cultural agency in the government, I have continued to argue to them that the traditional view that cultural heritage just needs to be protected is going to be unsustainable over time, because the government budget is being increasingly used to fund social security, which means that the amount of money available for the protection of cultural assets has been slashed over the course of the last number of years, until recently, when the tourism strategy allowed us to reposition cultural heritage from being a cost centre to being something which government should invest in. Having said all of that, it has not been the case that that a lot of the local communities have been involved in this process. A lot of the development of tourism over the course of the last 6 years has been driven by government policy and by local government policy. And as the numbers have increased, it has become increasingly important to involve local communities in working out how to create a balance between the revenues generated by tourism and the costs being borne by local communities. As a result of that, the tourism tax, so-called, was implemented. It's now been running for the last 2 years and provides enormous amounts of money, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars being provided to heritage and, of course, also to the national parks and various other areas in order to try and reduce the burden to local communities of the increase in tourism. In March of this year, the DMOs, the destination management organizations, have been, at least their mission has been largely restructured to improve the participation of local interests in the management of local tourist destinations. It used to be, until last year, amazingly enough, that about 75% of all the money spent by DMOs was being spent on promotion, and very little of it was being spent on improving the customer experience or in dealing with issues of over-tourism. And the DMOs, as of the end of this March, have been repositioned in order to include more of the local interests, in order to increase the number of voices that are reaching the ears of government. Historically, until very, very recently, tourism in Japan has always been thought of as being the domain of the carrier, the train, the bus, the travel agency. It has always been thought of as being a transportation issue, and as a result, a lot of the administration of tourism in Japan has been dominated by trains, planes, and travel agencies, with almost no voice being made available to local communities. Since that has been changed over the course of the next several years, we need to get that implemented to make sure that the people who actually have to deal with people arriving to spend time in their communities actually have a say in the way that those tourist destinations are being managed. That has not been the case so far. Having said all of that, I'll just finish up by saying this, and I'll repeat myself from the beginning. Since this has only been going on for the last 6 years, possibly, including in Kyoto, we are not one of the best places to talk to about how to manage it, because it's only really just been started. But certainly, I think from the Kyoto experience, there is an increasing focus on working out how it is that the benefits of tourism need to be felt and also understood in a more comprehensive fashion. In my work with the Kyoto government, it is frequent that people who are not directly affected by tourism will say, there are too many tourists in Japan, David, and we need in Kyoto, and we need to reduce them. And and I continue to say, well, that's great, and I appreciate the fact that you're being inconvenienced. But on the other hand, you also have to ask the question: in a world where the number of workers is about to decline by 42.5%, who is it exactly that you believe is going to pay for your medical costs and for your pension? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. I think that really you provided some very sobering statistics for Japan and Kyoto in particular. But more importantly, you've demonstrated that the government can respond and is responding to some of these challenges. And I think what you mentioned about DMOs, that I think that's a phenomenon that's happening all over the world. They are changing, they are responding to the local conditions and how we travel and more importantly, how tourism is being planned and managed, because that is critical. And having that local voice in that process is essential if we are going to achieve that balance that I think everybody has been talking about. Because for the local communities to benefit from tourism, tourism is one of the systems where you have people who are directly benefiting. So it really comes down to improving services and plowing back that tourism revenue in those cities, in those economies. So thank you very much. Well, that concludes the speaking session. I'm going to ask one question, the same question, to all 5 of you. And luckily, they have been given the question in advance, so hopefully they've had some time to think about it. To just try to probe a little bit more on some of the issues that we've been discussing over the past day. So let me start with you, Mr. Atkinson. I'll do it in the other direction. So from your perspective, what actions are needed to change tourism development and management to be more inclusive and empower local communities to share their cultural expressions and heritage without compromising their values?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of things that are being done here in Kyoto and across the country. Japan is a minor language when it comes to the rest of the world, and it is an amazing concept. But most of the cultural experience, the stories that we heard about earlier on, are only pretty much available in Japanese, and very unfortunately, because you're dealing with a Japanese provider talking to Japanese people where there is a level of mutual understanding. It has not been the case that level of presentation has been presented in a way to Japanese people that means that the stories are being told. It's a very much, come look, take a picture and leave process. And that is one of the things that's being changed at the moment. And I'll go back to what I was saying earlier on. The other problem that we've had, or that we continue to have specifically in Kyoto, is this double-edged sword. First of all, getting people to understand that there are indirect benefits to tourism as well as the direct benefits. People see the direct cost, but they don't always see the indirect benefits. And I think there's a significant amount of work that needs to be done to make sure that people understand that, certainly in Kyoto and other parts of Japan, that your pension and your medical expenses are at least partially being borne by the tourism that you see as being a cost. I personally believe that the definition of over-tourism is the belief that the cost is greater than the revenue. I believe that should be the definition of over-tourism. That's something which I think needs to be focused on. And the other thing, which is, I think, in the Japanese context, been very difficult because it is a new strategy, is that the concept of managing in a strategic and holistic context is almost completely missing. People think of it as being, a transportation company, a hotel industry. They don't think of it as being a holistic process. And one of the things in government that we've been doing is spending an enormous amount of time is getting all of the various different ministries to talk to each other, to make sure that there are no gaps, and to make sure that that it is a holistic experience, that people arrive, and from that point on, it has been comprehensively planned rather than just piecemeal developed. And that, I think, is actually one of the most important issues. And following from that, of course, is if you're going to get all the government ministries involved, then you need to get local people involved. In the DMOs, and I'll wrap up, in the DMOs, for example, one of the things that I've been working with them on is to make sure that the representatives of the owners of cultural heritage sites are actively involved in the DMO to make sure that the people who run the national park in an area are not just invited as observers, but are board members of the DMO to make sure that the representatives of the local committee, of the local community, are actively represented, to make sure not only that the trains and the buses and the hotels are involved, but also the restaurants and the activity providers and the crafts and other people, to make sure that everybody who is absorbing the costs and receiving the benefits is sitting on a regular basis at the same table so that everybody gets a voice and so that it can be a balanced process rather than just a bunch of people sitting there who are benefiting in revenue terms and therefore getting a bigger voice than I believe they deserve.
Yes, thank you very much. I think you've just kind of explained the future for us in terms of how we need to work together. And I think that's the spirit of this whole conference and why UNWTO and UNESCO have come together, because our two stakeholder groups don't often do that. We operate kind of in parallel, and this holistic approach, I think, is absolutely the future. So Jean-Philippe, I'm going to ask you the same question. So from your perspective, what actions are needed to change tourism development management to be more inclusive and empower the local communities to share cultural expressions and heritage without compromising their values?
Well, as a representative of a technology company, as well as a travel company, I think the answer is lying in the use of more information. To the point made of all the analysis that the European Commission is doing, obviously we have a lot of information at Expedia that we are reviewing and sharing with government agencies in trying to focus the growth of tourism in that country to those times of year when travel is low, and to see if we can match that with demand somewhere in the world of people that are still looking at where they may want to go, and try to focus that travel to that specific location so that we can spread the tourism and not have peaks and then times of very limited travel. And so focus specific marketing campaigns with that data on those areas and those travelers that are making the booking at that time. We know people make their bookings usually 6 months before. We know exactly when people are making their bookings, where they are looking, and so we can be very specific. That's one in working with the governments. Second thing, which is important, is to work very closely with our partners, which are travel companies, at least in a B2B sense, which are hotels, which are airlines, but also local experiences. We are growing significantly the amount of experiences, local activities that we have on our sites. And we need to make sure that our partners also have the opportunity to focus on their local culture, and so when dealing with them, to make sure, and this is to link it to the UNESCO sustainability pledge that we are working on together, is to help our partners focus on these locally sourced products, local experiences, and not compromise on that. It is all about also educating, in a way, the traveler of the great stuff that is local, and not to have them come over to experience the same thing that they have at home. And it is about supporting those efforts. And we do that also through campaigns together with those partners. Whether it is enjoying respect, whether it is the focus on specific area that is less visited, and to make sure that people see the great value of those areas, and try to pull people out of the capitals into the countryside, and that is, of course, sometimes difficult because people want to see that specific hotspot, and everybody's been talking about it, and you cannot leave the country without it. But if you can show the second place that is less visited, and with the additional experience that you can have, the additional time that you don't have to stand in the line and be with one of the many people that are visiting that same place, I think we can move the mind of the traveler to those secondary destinations, and that's our challenge, and that's where we want to focus.
No, I think you really, in terms of how we communicate, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of information, and how we use that, I think, is going to be critical. And obviously marketing is important, and we just heard about how DMOs are shifting away from just purely being marketing organizations to being more management organizations. And I think with marketing campaigns as well, that's how you reach people, that's how you reach the consumer. And I also wanted just to mention, we talk about local communities. Local communities is a very important part of what we're trying to work with and include and empower. But we have to always remember that local communities are very diverse, and there are people who directly benefit. There are hotels and restaurants. They're part of that local community, and we need to remember that. So thank you for that. Okay, so we're now, Michela, from an EU perspective, what are the answers to tourism development and management to be more inclusive? How do we empower those local communities? How do we share those cultural expressions without compromising those values?
So let me share with you maybe two elements that complement what has already been mentioned. The first one is that we try to engage also with younger generations, not only to educate the tourists, but also the people at school and at university, so that hopefully the next generation of travelers will already be at an advanced stage of consciousness about the sustainable tourism. So in that sense, we have developed the Cultural Gems, which is a web app. It's available online, where we try exactly to map in the different cities that we looked at, the 190 cities, those hidden gems. And this information comes primarily, hopefully, from the citizens themselves and from students and their families. And the reason is that we really try to figure out how to attract people not only on the main touristic sites, but exactly on those that you would share as a personal experience. And the fact that we tackle students is really key to us. And in fact, early next year, we will go to Athens with some universities where we will use that app. But of course, you can map it also for cities that are not yet there. For instance, Kyoto, we can include the data on the hidden gems. We already have 5 nice tours included in our program, so I think those hidden gems could be included in the web app. And the second element relates more to a better understanding of why sometimes people have this kind of tourism phobia. What we found out doing research is that quite often the perception and the actual numbers of how many tourists are around do not match. Sometimes people feel that there are 4 times more tourists than actually are. So we also try to understand what is it that drives maybe this discontent of the people vis-à-vis the tourists, because there are different reasons for every country. And as David said, it's also different reasons why you should promote in different countries. For instance, for Japan, there were obvious reasons. So we try to get more into the understanding of the mismatch between the perception and the actual levels of tourism and what drives the tourism phobia.
I think that's excellent. And they say the youth shall inherit the earth. So focusing on youth, I think, is critical. On education, one of the things I think you heard yesterday about UNESCO's approach is, one of our key pillars of sustainability is this idea how can we get people to stay longer in a destination? What are those stories? What are those attractions that they can see to do that and to disperse them throughout a destination? So really taking a destination approach to this and trying to identify those hidden gems that are out there, because they are maybe even more interesting than the must-sees, because again, we need to get that information out, and I think the EU has a critical role in that to help that on that very critical topic of understanding and getting that perspective. So thank you. Okay, Veomani, we have, I'm going to ask you the same question. I think this may be a little bit easier for you because you're living it. You're part of this local community. You're empowering local citizens. So please tell us your secrets.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So it's similar thing to the Kyoto. You know, we also have complained that Luang Prabang is over tourist sometimes. So the population of the downtown Luang Prabang is only 80,000 people, but we have visited over 700 tourists. But how the government or the community manage with the tourist flow? One is very good example. We have similar thing to the MNO. We have called MON. So that the community that manage the destination, MDN, networking that including all the private sector, village elder, and even the school, university that can give a voice. This is the second year practice. We hope that this will be include more local to understand and also give education to the who involved in the tourists or benefit to the from the tourism, so that they know what to host the customer and what they can benefit to, because skill training is very important for us. You know, it's a young, and people still have challenge find good skilled worker in our country. Even Luang Prabang, you know, have so many hotels, but you still have to bring in the skilled worker from outside of the country. This is something that we hope the government can do, like more training skill. So also other good example that for Luang Prabang, you're not allowed to drive big bus to the city, to the town. Actually, the town is only 2 kilometers long, so that you have to use the tuk-tuk as a local transportation, that you have to park the big car outside or big bus, and then they can use the local bus. Also, you know, people fight for the sunset view of the mountain Pusi. They can see the great view, and also that you can take the boat to see the sunset. We also, our center offer the treehouse sunset, you know, I'm sure that more place. And, you know, and as I say, the marketing is important, so that if we can get more support from international organizations to help, like or Expedia, you know, that how to, you know, promote people go outside of, even Luang Prabang have so many activities people don't know, but actually people just like jam at downtown. So that, I think that's my experience. And it is for Luang Prabang, I have to say that, or I agree with you, it's a double edges, you know, it's a lot benefit to the local, that who, I mean, major income for Luang Prabang is reliable on tourism. So, but it also help us to think like what other culture that we can preserve. You know, we have so many traditions that can show to the tourists. Also, local practice. You know, like almsgiving. That's another challenge. But it's come to the good. The government set a good policy with the village elder that they not offer import. Like sweet they offer to the monks, so they have to offer sticky rice. So they also benefit the villager, you know, to sell local products. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think you just demonstrated the idea of this whole system that we live in, and you know, you are providing a service that is enriching the visitor experience tremendously. Within a context of a very complicated tourism system in Luang Prabang, with traffic issues and hotel issues and all of these things that can't be solved by your enterprise, but again has to be solved by people working together. And I always look at it as peeling an onion. We're always looking at all of the different layers of sustainability. But I really appreciate what you're doing, and I think sharing your experience with the group has been very valuable, so thank you. And finally, I will ask Sakokoto the same question. So from your expression, what are these actions and that are needed to change tourism development and management to be more inclusive and to empower the local communities?
Thank you. Also, I failed to mention in my presentation that we just became a World Heritage Site back in July. So we're very proud also to announce that. We've been in existence since 1957, where it did become a park. It is a provincial park and well supported by the surrounding communities. Even though we have a major center that's about an hour and a half away from the site, we're very well supported by the city of Lethbridge and also the smaller towns that surround the park itself. But we have created many opportunities. As an example, we are an archaeological preserve, and so we do work with universities and colleges, and some of our people, the Blackfoot students that want to become archaeologists, they will come to the sites and training programs are set up for them. So opportunities are being created. But because of the nature of the park itself, a lot of standards have been put in place to ensure that we do protect visitors when they come into our area and also to protect the staff that we have. I think we're very fortunate that when individuals recognize the significance and the importance of the area, they petitioned and pressured the provincial government to protect the area and also to convert it into a park. We feel that because of the images on the rocks are so important to us, and it's part of our education, and we wanted to preserve that. But we also work with our local artisans to make sure that we also promote small businesses in the community, where they bring a lot of their arts and crafts to the visitor center, and that's where they are sold. Also, we offer a lot of publications by some authors from the surrounding areas and others as well, so we can educate the public as to what the information and also what we want to share. And our objective is to get, especially the country of Canada, to begin to understand and to realize that there is another part of our land that we can't ignore anymore. We need to know more about these people and how we can learn from the culture that they have. So now we're very, I would say, advantage where there are being some changes even made within the public education, where they're indigenizing the curriculum, and a lot of our history and knowledge is being shared at that level. And what that does, it really enhances and starts exposing all the different unique sites within our territory. And again, that's very educational because land-based teaching is very important, and this is what we're sharing with the surrounding community and also with the world. I had a very unique situation where on one of the tours, there was a gentleman that was standing by me, and his goal in his lifetime was to visit 200 World Heritage Sites in his lifetime, and he was standing by me, and he was on 102. But this goes to prove that the world are very interested in what these sites have to offer. And I think it's a good way of beginning to understand a way of life, especially from that community. And I think that's really important. Now, networking is also important for us because the area that we're in is very isolated. And this is where we work with other parks, other organizations, and we promote one another. And we are at capacity, and sometimes even to come into our area to try and secure sites, even just to park your RV, you have to book it about 6 or 7 months in advance. So we really thank the surrounding organizations for supporting us and to ensure that we meet our objectives. Now, through our park this past summer, we had anywhere from 60 to 65 visitors that went through our center. And even through our tours, our regular tours, we had close to 36,000 that went through that. And we have educational programs. But every year, what we want to do is to offer new programs to all of our visitors. And this is why we want to ensure that what we offer is going to be to their benefit and also to learn from the people of the land. And we feel that's very important because in order to do that, standards are very important and how we deal with the public. And even the staff that we have within the visitor center, they even want to learn how to speak the language. So that way they can greet the visitors and also to wish them well on their journey home. And this is how we wanted to work with the surrounding communities. But there are many things that we are doing to really continue enhancing and to find innovative ways as to how we can continue with the education and also the awareness, and that's really important for us.
Great, thank you very much for that. I really like the idea that education leads to opportunities. I think that's something that is sometimes gets lost in all of this, and the importance of networking and the importance of learning, because learning is, the other pillar of UNESCO obviously is education. The E of UNESCO is education, and we have a program called lifelong learning, and that's really what it's all about. And we really we're learning, we want to continually discover. That's the core of travel, and for me, it really underscores the fact that tourism is all about that. It's sharing of our cultures. It's sharing of that understanding, and in that understanding, you make that connection, and you start to solve the problems of local communities, because local communities are part of it. They are sharing their heritage and their culture with the visitor. So I don't know if we have time for questions from the audience. 5 minutes? Okay, so. That's probably are there any questions from the, yes. Can we get a microphone?
My comment is directed towards Mr. Atkinson. I would like to very kindly disagree with your definition of over-tourism, where you limited it to discussions of cost and revenue, when, in my belief, there are very significant impacts on the natural environment and the social status of the local communities. Thank you.
A response to that, David?
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I think it's a question of how you define cost and how you define benefit. It's not impossible that in terms of the generation and distribution of revenues, that the problems being, and certainly we see them here, that I think the definition of cost, as the gentleman suggests, needs to include the cost to the natural environment and other areas. And I think, in Japan, there's been quite a lot of work and more work that needs to be done to make sure that the revenues generated by tourism are not monopolized by the people who collect the money. So Kyoto, for example, has a hotel tax, and part of the reason for that is that there are other participants in the local community who do not get a direct benefit, and the benefits are being concentrated in areas where the costs are not being attributed to the people who are benefiting in terms of revenues. And that is, I think, a traditional role of government, that you have to find a way of, as the gentleman suggests, broadly defining what cost is and making sure that the money that is being generated in the revenue centres is appropriately allocated to make sure that those costs are being funded. I mean, this is one of the things we found in heritage, for example, in Japan. that people who come to visit a temple in Kyoto, the revenues generated are generated at the temple, but a lot of the costs are being borne by other people who are not revenue beneficiaries. And it may come round indirectly, but I do believe it is the case that the market economy is not necessarily going to make sure that the actual revenues are appropriately divided up amongst the broader community. And that's one of the things which I think Japan is doing a reasonably good job at, is making sure that, for example, the costs being borne by the national parks are appropriately funded to make sure that the burden to the natural environment is paid for. And there's an enormous amount of money which is being spent. This is something I've worked with them very closely on. An enormous amount of money being spent on Japan's national parks that was not being spent before, because we have found a way of indirectly reallocating some of the revenues towards the national parks that would not have been allocated to the national parks simply by looking at the people who are collecting the revenues. And that has been done through the national tourism tax.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, I see one hand, so maybe one more question. Well, while we do that, I think we have a saying in English of "Don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg," and I think that's what you're talking about, because this is something that, from UNESCO's point of view, obviously we're in this game because we want to protect the heritage and we want to see tourism revenue going towards that, and it's very, very important for that. So please, the last question.
Thank you, Peter. You mentioned earlier that you can't manage what you can't measure, and this is manifestly true, and it's so valuable to have these very sophisticated tools of management or of measurement for communities and cultural assets. But when we're speaking of intangible assets, I'm curious about whether there are also intangible measurements. And so I would like to ask Veo, what, in your experience working with communities and working with creative people, with artists, what are the sort of intangible measurements, or what is harder to measure, and how have you gone about measuring that?
Thank you, Joe. So, yeah, actually, it's a lot of intangible heritage in Luang Prabang that haven't been registered or studied. Actually, government try to work on that. We have so many things that have not been recorded. So it's a similar way that how the textile produced that we never have, the proper like museum that store the place. So this part of our non-profit project beside the business that we have this heritage collection that we collect objects around the country. So we have over 1,000 objects in our collection. When the company start, we see that many textile, many pieces that go out of the country, but we have small budget is over 19 years. We have collected what is benefit back to the community that they see it as a result of inspiration. Even some of the villages that they never see other pieces like over 100 years old. So, for example, so also, when you don't have, people will come to our weaving center and asking like how people know this pattern, how people remember this pattern. But actually, the pattern that have been created, the weaving bring to Laos is over 1,000 years, almost 1,200 years, and it's been practiced over year, but it's never written in a book. So up till now, probably the second book of Lao textile. So, but these sample pieces, all the family will have, I think, similar culture to Japan, that you have this kimono. So every family will have the special piece for them. And this will be the story passed on to the next generation. Is that your family piece. Also, other thing like culture, other cultural festival, we have Lao New Year Festival. It's many festival actually in Long Prabang that is not do that for tourists, but this is for the cultural beliefs. Also, many temples there that people still practice. So I'm practice most like the Lao, we practice Buddhism. And you get to go to temple with your grandmother. When you're little, you bring food to the monk. As we don't have much good education in Laos, lots of young children will come from countryside. They get to study in the temple, in the monastery, that they can finish high school or even go university. I think this is the way of life that people might not see that important, but it is important that since we start become a tourist destination, and we need good education, and we see that all the workers, the our staff who've been trained in the monastery, that is very good, behave very different from the people that never been trained in the monastery. So I think that's how the locals still practice in a way, but it never record that in a proper, document. Yeah. Is that my answer your question? Thank you, George.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a very good way to end this session. And I want to say thank you to all of our speakers. So please give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you for moderating, Mr. Peter De Bruyn. And that wraps up session 2. Would you give them a big applause once again as they leave the stage? A very inspiring discussion. Yes, from the indigenous communities, research institute, creatives, and the private sector.